The morning sun hit the manicured lawns of Westlake, Ohio, casting a golden glow over McMansions, private tennis courts, and pristine swimming pools. Inside one of these massive homes, the air was thick with tension and perfume. Lara stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting the veil of her wedding dress. The dress wasn't from a high-end boutique in New York or a designer showroom in Chicago. She had bought it on sale at a modest bridal shop near downtown Cleveland. To Lara, it was perfect. It was simple, elegant, and represented the honest, uncomplicated life she was choosing. But to the women standing behind her, it was an absolute tragedy. "I still can't believe you're actually going through with this, Lara," said Chloe, her maid of honor, as she aggressively applied a layer of lip gloss. Chloe was wearing a designer dress that cost more than Lara's entire wedding budget. A church downtown? Near the old warehouses? It's going to smell like river water and exhaust fumes. "It's a beautiful, historic church, Chloe," Lara said softly, keeping her voice calm. "And it's close to where Adam's friends live." Lara's aunt, Victoria, let out a sharp, aristocratic laugh from the plush armchair. Victoria was a staple of the Westlake Country Club scene, a woman who measured a person's worth entirely by their zip code and the brand of their watch. "Adam's friends," Victoria sneered, shaking her head. "You mean the crew from the local garage?" "Lara, darling, look at yourself. You have a college degree. Your family has a reputation in this county. You could have had Richard. He's a partner at a top accounting firm in Beechwood. He plays golf with your father. Instead, you are throwing your life away on a penniless grease monkey." "He is not a grease monkey," Lara said, turning around to face them. Her eyes were fiercely protective. "His name is Adam. He is a mechanic, yes, but he works harder than anyone I have ever met. He is kind. He listens to me. When my car broke down in the middle of winter, he didn't just fix it, he made sure I was safe, drove me home, and didn't charge me a dime because he knew I was struggling with rent. He loves me for who I am." "Love doesn't pay the mortgage in a nice neighborhood, sweetie," Chloe mocked, checking her reflection. "Have you seen his truck? It's a dented, rusted old Ford. It looks like it belongs in a junkyard. And those Dickies jumpsuits he wears? They literally have permanent oil stains. I would be embarrassed to be seen at a drive-through with him, let alone a marriage altar." Lara took a deep breath, refusing to let them ruin her day. She knew exactly who Adam was. He was a quiet, humble man who lived in a small, rented apartment in Lakewood. He worked long hours at a local auto repair shop on the west side of Cleveland. His hands were often rough, and he always had a faint scent of motor oil and peppermint gum around him. But when he looked at her, she felt completely safe. In a world full of superficial men trying to impress her with leased sports cars and fake wealth, Adam was real. "I don't care about his truck, and I don't care about his money," Lara said firmly, stepping away from the mirror. "I love him, and today I am marrying him." Victoria rolled her eyes and stood up, smoothing down her designer skirt. "Well, don't expect us to pretend this is the wedding of the century. We are sitting in the back. I just hope none of our friends from the country club see us walking into that neighborhood." The ceremony was held at Grace Community Church, a small, weathered brick building located in a working-class district of Cleveland. The paint on the front doors was slightly peeling, but inside, the wooden pews were polished, and the stained glass windows let in beautiful, colorful streams of light. On one side of the aisle sat Adam's guests, a handful of regular blue-collar guys from the auto shop, wearing their best off-the-rack department store slacks, and a few elderly neighbors from Lakewood who treated Adam like a son. They were smiling, laughing, and genuinely happy. On the other side sat Lara's family and friends from Westlake and Beechwood. They sat stiffly, holding their expensive leather purses tightly against their sides, as if they were afraid someone might steal them. They looked around the modest church with visible disgust. At the front of the church, near the altar, stood Adam. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He was wearing a basic, dark blue suit he had bought from a local department store. It didn't fit him perfectly, the sleeves were slightly too long, and his hair, usually hidden under a baseball cap, was neatly combed back. To anyone from Westlake, he looked like a man who was completely out of his depth. In the back row, Chloe whispered loudly to Lara's cousin Megan, "Look at that suit. I think my dad uses better fabric to wipe down his golf clubs. And look at his shoes. Are those from a supermarket?" Megan giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. "Honestly, it's charity. Lara is doing charity work by marrying him. Did you see the old truck parked outside? It's literally leaking oil onto the asphalt. It's pathetic." Lara's father stood beside her at the entrance of the church. He sighed, looking at his daughter with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "It's not too late to run, Lara. I can tell the priest you got cold feet. We can go have lunch at the club, and we never have to speak of this again." Lara looked down the aisle. She didn't see the cheap suit. She didn't see the modest church. She only saw Adam's eyes, which were fixed entirely on her, filled with a deep, unwavering adoration. "Walk me down the aisle, Dad," Lara said, her voice steady and resolute. As the traditional wedding music began to play on the old church organ, Lara walked down the aisle. Her heart swelled with happiness. When her father handed her over, Adam took her hand. His palms were a little rough, a reminder of his daily hard work, but his grip was warm and reassuring. "You look absolutely beautiful," Adam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You look pretty good yourself, mechanic," Lara whispered back, flashing a bright, genuine smile. The priest stepped forward, opened his Bible, and cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." In the back pews, the quiet snickering from the Westlake crowd continued. Victoria adjusted her pearls, leaning over to whisper to her husband, "Let's just get through this quickly so we can leave before the reception. I refuse to eat sheet cake in a church basement." The priest had just finished his opening remarks and was about to ask for the vows when a low, deep rumble vibrated through the floorboards of the old church. At first, it sounded like distant thunder, but the rumbling didn't stop. It grew louder, deeper, and heavier, rattling the old stained glass windows in their frames. The ground beneath their feet shook. The priest stopped speaking. The guests looked around in confusion. "Is that an earthquake?" Chloe asked, her voice suddenly high and panicked. The rumbling noise transformed into the powerful, synchronized purr of heavy, high-performance engines. Through the frosted glass windows of the church entrance, flashes of blinding light reflected off the walls. One of the auto shop mechanics near the back stood up and peeked out the window. His jaw dropped. "Holy smoke, you guys need to see this." Unable to contain their curiosity, several guests, including Lara's snobbish relatives, turned around to look outside. What they saw completely defied logic. The modest, narrow street in downtown Cleveland was completely blocked. A massive, high-end convoy had pulled up, completely shutting down traffic. At the front and back were heavy, midnight black Cadillac Escalades with flashing security lights. But tucked between them were millions of dollars worth of exotic, custom-built sports cars, sleek, aerodynamic hypercars with experimental engines that looked like they belonged on a futuristic racetrack. Every single vehicle carried New York license plates. Before anyone could utter a word, the heavy wooden doors of the church were pushed open. A group of men and women walked into the building. They didn't look like residents of Cleveland, let alone a working-class neighborhood. They were dressed in bespoke, custom-tailored Italian suits and high-end designer dresses that made the Westlake crowd look like they were wearing rags. These were people whose faces appeared weekly on the covers of major business magazines. Lara's father gasped, his eyes wide with shock. Is that Marcus Vance's former chief counsel? And that's the CEO of the global tech syndicate in Manhattan. Top journalists from major international financial news outlets followed behind them, carrying professional cameras, though they kept them lowered out of respect for the chapel. The elite group walked down the aisle with absolute authority. They didn't look at the Westlake crowd. They didn't look at the modest decorations. They walked straight toward the altar. Lara stood frozen, her hand still clutched in Adam's. She looked at the billionaires, then looked at her fiancé, completely bewildered. Adam? What is happening? Who are these people? Adam didn't look surprised. In fact, for the first time all day, the nervous tension left his shoulders. He stood up straight, his posture transforming from a humble local mechanic into someone commanding, powerful, and immensely confident. The lead man, an older gentleman wearing a tailored suit with a discreet gold pin on his lapel, stepped up to the altar. He stopped right in front of Adam. The entire room held its breath. The snobbish relatives in the back stood up, completely paralyzed by confusion. The older gentleman bowed his head respectfully to the man in the cheap department store suit. "Congratulations on your wedding, Mr. Vance," the man said, his voice echoing clearly through the quiet church. "The board of directors sends its warmest regards. The global operations are secure, and the press has been handled according to your instructions." The church was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the old carpet. "Mr. Vance?" Lara repeated, her voice a tiny whisper. She looked at Adam, her mind racing, trying to connect the pieces. Adam turned to look at her. A soft, apologetic smile appeared on his face. He gently took both of her hands in his. "Lara, I have a confession to make," Adam said, his voice smooth and calm. "My name isn't just Adam. It's Adam Vance." A collective gasp echoed from the back of the church. Lara's Aunt Victoria felt her knees go weak, grabbing the pew in front of her for support. "Vance? As in, Vance Motors? The multi-billion-dollar global automotive empire?" "Yes," Adam continued, looking only at Lara. "My family built Vance Motors. When I took over as CEO 3 years ago, my life became completely overwhelmed by fake high society events, corporate climbers, and people who only cared about my net worth. Every woman I met was only interested in the penthouses, the yachts, and the family bank account. I couldn't trust anyone." He took a step closer to her, his eyes full of emotion. "So, I made a decision. I stepped away from the Manhattan headquarters for a year. I put the board of directors in charge of daily operations, packed a bag, and moved to Ohio under a fake identity. I wanted to live a normal life. I wanted to work with my hands, doing basic repairs at a regular shop, just to remember what real life felt like. But most importantly, I wanted to find someone who would love me for my heart, not my bank account." Lara's eyes filled with tears, completely overwhelmed by the revelation. "The day my truck broke down near your apartment, and you brought me a hot coffee while I was working on it in the freezing rain, I knew," Adam whispered, a tear escaping his eye. "You didn't know who I was. You thought I was just a broke mechanic trying to make rent. But you treated me with more respect, kindness, and love than anyone in high society ever had. You stood by me when your family mocked me. You defended me when your friends called me a failure. You loved me when you thought I had nothing." Adam looked back at the elite executives standing in the aisle, then turned back to the priest. "We are ready to proceed with the vows, Father." The priest swallowed hard, nodded quickly, and cleared his throat. "Right. Yes, let us continue." As the ceremony proceeded, Lara's family and friends from Westlake were entirely incapacitated by humiliation. Chloe was bright red, staring down at her shoes, realizing she had just spent months mocking one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the entire country. Aunt Victoria looked physically ill, remembering how she had compared the CEO of a global empire to a grease monkey. Lara's father stood in absolute silence, realizing that his daughter hadn't ruined her life. She had just married into one of the most powerful dynasties in the world. When the priest finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Adam drew Lara close and kissed her with a deep, passionate intensity. The blue-collar mechanics cheered loudly, and the Wall Street billionaires joined in, clapping with immense respect for their brilliant, reclusive leader. As they walked out of the church doors as husband and wife, the scene outside was spectacular. The journalists photographed the couple, their flashes lighting up the grey Cleveland sky. Adam's old, dented Ford pickup truck was still there, but parked right behind it was a brand-new, custom-designed Vance hypercar, a sleek masterpiece of engineering worth more than all the homes in Westlake combined. Adam opened the passenger door for Lara, smiling, We can leave the truck here for the shop guys. I think you deserve a slightly smoother ride for our honeymoon." Lara laughed, wiping away a tear of pure happiness. "I would have ridden in the truck with you forever, Adam. I know," he said softly, kissing her forehead. "And that's exactly why you'll never have to again." The snobbish relatives stood on the sidewalk, completely ignored by the elite crowd, left behind in the dust as the massive convoy prepared to move out. They tried to wave and get Lara's attention, but the security detail gently but firmly blocked them from getting close. The convoy swept out of the downtown district, heading toward the airport, where Adam's private luxury jet was waiting. Within 24 hours, Lara's life completely transformed. She moved from her quiet, modest Ohio suburb to a breathtaking, 3-story penthouse in the heart of Manhattan. The apartment featured floor-to-ceiling glass windows that looked out over the sweeping expanse of Central Park and the glittering New York City skyline. Her closet was now filled with genuine designer wear, and the world's finest chefs prepared their meals. But despite the immense luxury, the private jets, and the corporate galas where she was introduced as the First Lady of Vance Motors, Lara never changed, and neither did Adam. On weekends, away from the corporate cameras and the high society crowds, Adam would still pull on an old pair of overalls, slide under one of his custom sports cars in the penthouse's private garage, and get grease on his hands. And Lara would always bring him a hot cup of coffee, sitting on an upturned milk crate next to him, laughing and talking about their days. She had stood by a regular mechanic when the world looked down on him, and in return, she had won a love that was richer than any empire.